Hello, I'm Richard Hara, and this is Social Impact Live, a weekly conversation with members of the Columbia School of Social Work community. I'm pleased to have two guests here today, Jenny Crawford and Lorna Woodham. Jenny Crawford is currently an Associate Director of Field Education at the Columbia School of Social Work and teaches the Contemporary Social Issues Policy course and about forensic social work and mitigation practice. Ms. Crawford was the first Director of Social Work at the Bronx Defenders, a holistic public defender office in the South Bronx that provides criminal, family, and civil defense. She was also Director of Social Work with the Urban Justice Center's Mental Health Project. In 2009, Jenny received an award from the New York City chapter of the NASW for her outstanding contributions in social work administration. Lorna Woodham holds a BA and an MSSW from Columbia, in addition to a Master's of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary. In 2018, Ms. Woodham started a consulting firm called Interdisciplinary Reentry Initiative for Empowerment, or IRIE, out of her strong belief in a human rights approach to healing vulnerable persons and undervalued communities. She currently consults for the District of New Jersey's 4 problem-solving courts. Ms. Crawford and Ms. Woodham, welcome to Social Impact Live.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Before I get to our main topic of these problem-solving courts that you're involved with, I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about your personal journey to and through social work. Ms. Woodham, if you'd care to sort of start?
Sure. I took the liberty of bringing a poem by Langston Hughes called Mother to Son that I'd like to share with you before I begin. It reads, "Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a-climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark." And I share that because I'm not even sure how I got here, but I will tell you that I have a husband who's still incarcerated. He's been incarcerated for 32 years. And I have 2 daughters that I have raised since they were 9 months old and 2 years old. And I'm here because after they were able to obtain their graduate degrees and go on to just become amazing, and I say that not because I'm their mother, but amazing social justice activists in their own rights, both within the arts community for my younger daughter and within the social justice community as it pertains to social work for my older daughter, who's also a Columbia alum. I am here because I wanted to be able to support families who are dealing with incarceration. And so when I returned to school, my hope was simply to go back to the community and lend support based on my lived experience and provide hope. And so I went back to school to get a dual degree in social work and the MDiv to add a spiritual component. So I'm here just because, I don't know, God's grace and mercy.
Well, thank you, and I'm so glad that you are here to share your story with us today. Jenny, would you care to? Yeah.
My pathway is a little bit different. I'm obviously a white woman. I'm from a small town in Virginia whose father was a public defender and grew up very much around rights-based advocacy and discussing issues of inequity. After college, I went and worked in homeless shelters in the Bay Area and was very much confronted with issues of inequity and access, and quickly noticed how many folks were reintegrating from incarcerated settings and with no support and really just falling into safety nets of the city that were not able to really meet their needs. After coming to social work school here at Columbia, I was immediately confused about my path. I didn't want to be a clinician, and I didn't see myself so removed as a macro practitioner. And I really wanted to do the interconnected work through an advocacy lens, and landed really at the Bronx Defenders, which where I grew up kind of personally and professionally, where we represented folks in the South Bronx charged with a myriad of issues, really, really rooted in racism and poverty, and the idea of advocating and meeting clients where they were, and being able to translate into that information into such a binary system in such a humanistic way, to me is what social work really was. It wasn't something that I really felt like I had a grasp on here at the School of Social Work at that time. I thought I was going to go to law school, and clearly I didn't, and I'm glad that I didn't. I think social work as a discipline, as an ethos, as a value base, which Lauren and I talk about a lot, is my driving force to representing folks impacted by legal systems, and have grown so much in the last 20 years working particularly in this area, understanding how much work needs to be done, how much discussion and lived experiences are different. People's approaches to the work are really different, and really have moved into a less binary adversarial place, which I am more comfortable in. I'm definitely more comfortable in defense-based settings. That's in my blood. That's what I thought I would do. But working and meeting people like Lorna have been such an inspiration to learning how to bridge the dialogue of a system that is very adversarial and needs to be in a rights-based setting. But we need to find ways to bridge that.
Well, that's a large topic, tackling the entire criminal justice. And maybe we'll get to that in a second. Before continuing, I just want to remind our viewers that we do have a Q&A period for the last 10 minutes of the program. So if you've got some questions, please jot them down, submit them via the Facebook page, and we'll bring them up a little bit later on. So let's go back. So you're both working on this tremendous program, right? Called, is it the Problem Solving Courts Project, and how did it all come about?
Yeah, I think we should take a step back just for a second, just so potential students or people know. You as social work students, which is really unique to our discipline, we do very extensive field placements and service work. So that's alongside your curriculum. Since coming here, I've really focused on social work in the law, which is essentially forensic social work in all areas, though my background is definitely rooted in defense-based practice, and really realizing how isolated a lot of us were in legal settings. So I slowly started to coalesce with my colleagues. We created a coalition for social workers for the defense to really support students. In that kind of proliferation of the conversation, I ended up meeting Lorna as a student and connecting with a potential partner in Newark with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So this was a very new, exciting, innovative project. The idea was to bring in the social justice framework into a very rigid, legal, prosecutorial setting, but was very interested and open and curious about the humanity of the participants, which was unique. And it was an opportunity when Lauren and I met each other and knew her interests and her background, and how much tremendous of an asset she would be at this site. We ended up building a conversation with partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office in partnership with all the stakeholders there. So that's the federal defenders, the U.S. Attorney's Office, probation, to craft this partnership to support participants.
And the judges.
And the judges, can't forget the judges, certainly, definitely not. That was the inception of it. And then it was really Lorna going there, her insight into the work, her awareness into how to work with the players there, that we together were able to build a relationship to bring social work practitioners into this setting.
Okay, and can you tell me, Ms. Woodham, what you wanted to bring to these courts, either as a social worker or as a person?
I think while I was here at the School of Social Work, Trump was elected. And I found a very compassionate place, the School of Social Work, become very, very distraught and binary. I saw a split between the faculty and the students, and it moved me to realize that despite the fact that we practice as social workers, we still do have some very ingrained biases that prevent us oftentimes from listening and really practicing the attentive listening that we're learning about in the classrooms. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if we moved into a setting where we're forced to listen to the other side? So going into the court setting and going in to speak to a prosecutor was difficult for me to even imagine being able to do that. But I thought that I had nothing to lose as an internship. I could go in there and I could either, just do my social justice thing and tell them what I want to tell them and walk away. But I guess my MDiv degree came into play also.
Interesting.
And I learned about, and I thought about how good it is to give grace and mercy to others. So the point of going into this internship or into this field work, it was basically to learn how to have a conversation, how to be self-aware enough not to be overly triggered, because I'm not going to say I'm never triggered, but how to then combat that when you are triggered and still see the good that's in the person. Because here we have them inviting us in, right? So that there's something that they want to learn.
Yeah.
And so we should go in ready and willing to listen. So that's really why I did that.
Yeah. So, Jenny, Ms. Crawford, can you tell me?
Jenny's
So,
fine.
what does the work look like? This interdisciplinary team. What's the goal, and how do you get there?
Good question. I think what's important to take out of what Lorna is saying is that really the through line for social work practitioners is that gray area, working between the lines. And so there is a comfort and a curiosity, I think, for social work practitioners in legal settings to try to understand not only the legal framework, but how do we maneuver through it, in it, around it, to get the best outcomes for clients. And so what we found, and I think she really highlighted this perfectly, is we had to listen to the participants. Who are the folks that are reintegrating to their families and communities? What about their incarcerated experience, their trauma histories? Often what brings people into the criminal justice system is not represented in any of the proceedings leading up to the incarceration. And so really being attuned to what participants are looking for, certainly supportive services and case management services around what they can access in the community to live and to succeed, but also to have someone hear their story, have someone really reflect back, you matter, that counts. This is something that we want to bring in and humanize a pretty intimidating space. So unless folks have been in the court system, personally, professionally, if it's new to you, it can be very intimidating, knowing where people sit, why the judge sits higher up, or what the different constituents and stakeholders' roles are. And to be able to reflect back to each person how they're experiencing it, what their questions are, really became the beginning stages of the work. Now, and Lorna can speak to it from a day-to-day, it is more of an interdisciplinary. We have probation, the judges who represent each problem-solving court or each court, the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is the prosecutorial arm, and federal defenders, which is the federal arm. And the social work is kind of the person in the middle, the link.
Did you say the probation officer?
The probation. Did I say that? I don't know if I did, but she knows it better than I do. So please jump in. And you are the link to all those people, translating client or participant experiences, maybe reframing something that the judge's impression of a participant who's having trouble coming into court, maybe doing some psychoeducation around mental health, family trauma, understanding issues around transportation. We often would hear why can't, so-and-so come? And then maybe analysis of really not having access to transportation funds and maybe having some shame about talking about that. So it's a myriad of things.
Right. I would say that I think a good example of the work that's being done is this year, after I'd say about 3 years of talking about Restorative Justice Circle, we actually have it started. We have an intern who is now working on RJ circles, both for the participants individually so that they can meet and talk over things that they have in a restorative sense. And then we have now incorporated it into the court itself so that when they come in for sessions, we're now meeting in circles. And we have had a good response. Had we not been there to introduce this or to recommend it, it would still be the same setting with the judge sitting, up in her seat. And so I think we serve a valued purpose, and they're willing to listen and to think about it. The change came slowly, did take a while, but it teaches you as a social worker to stand your ground and to move not necessarily quickly, but to go slowly, and that it can happen.
Yeah. My sense of this setting, the program project, if you will, that you're involved with. So there are individuals who are being or have been released from federal facilities who, as a condition of that release, are working with you and your social work interns, right, to sort of address any issues that relate to reintegration, right, that we're talking about, and so on. So what I'm hearing is that you've approached this not in terms of, we just figure out what they need and provide it and so on, but you're looking at a whole systemic level culture shift, right? And sort of going back to that beginning and creating that interdisciplinary conversation with prosecutors, with public defenders, probation officers, judges, social, and so on, to really look at this in a way that sees it as sort of an ongoing process or a holistic.
And I think that's very key to take away from this conversation, because though we have very dynamic legal settings, public defenders locally do this work in a tremendous way. And I think what's really unique about Lorna's leadership and stewardship is bringing it into a very rigid, traditionally rigid, and certainly adversarial setting. And so kind of removing, as you say, some of the traditional positionality of defense and prosecution and probation and judges and that power structure, and bringing a shared humanity, a shared conversation together is very unique. I mean, you certainly see it in some settings, but I think that even the example, which is such a great example about restorative justice, because that is these types of conversations and interdisciplinary approaches, in our view, is what brings a more restorative, transformative idea of the justice system, which we know is racist and classist and problematic. And so as social workers, we should be in there helping to knit these different polarized, viewpoints together.
And I really think it's important and to say that you have the community activists, right? And they're working on the outside, and we need to be on the inside also lending support to the community activists so that when they're out there pushing, we could have a voice inside to say, this is also needed. And when someone's ready to listen, we can bring in or help them with the conversation around how to implement. So we need to be in both places.
Oh, so you're working with community leaders, representatives, and so on, as well as part of this?
Social workers are.
Social
Right,
workers.
the discipline of social work.
Okay. Just if we have a moment, so you've got students, social work interns as well, you're supervising.
Yes.
What's their experience been like? If you can share
It's
that.
the third year, too.
Third year of the
Third year.
program, yeah.
I would say it's been rewarding. I did ask them that question so that I could respond to you. And they said to say that it's difficult balancing the various ethics that they're coming into contact with, but that they're finding it worthwhile because they're learning how to do that. And they're learning how to use a lot of what props brings up for them in the setting.
Okay.
In terms of systems. And I would say that without them, they keep me grounded because it's easy to get into something and then forget why you're there in a way, and then to almost start buying into what you're listening to. And because they're there, they don't allow it.
Okay.
You know, they're very important to the process.
And it's so important because as someone who's so defense oriented, if I hadn't leaned into Lorna and worked so closely with her and the colleagues certainly in Newark who are really incredible, I feel like I would have been limited in my thinking and my awareness. So I really appreciate you and your work so much. And I think the self-awareness piece is so important to think about because it is an activating, difficult setting.
Yeah.
And I think of Alexander Ocasio-Cortez as a great example of somebody who can do inside and outside work and the power of being able to do both.
Yeah, and you know, for social workers, there's that direct practice dimension, right, where you've got to deal with people on an individual basis, but also to look at programs, to look at larger systemic issues and so on as you're doing, and to actually influence what's happening at that if you will, macro level, I think is really the promise of our profession and
Certainly.
discipline, right? So and what an opportunity for any student to experience.
We think so.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We've got some questions from the audience, and we have something from a prospective student. These women are incredible. I agree. We need more effective programs for reintegrating formerly incarcerated men and women into society. How is this addressed in your program?
It's addressed because the program works with people who are returning home on supervised release, and we help them to work through housing situation. We work through employment issues they may have. We have pro bono attorneys who assist them with any type of credit issues or surcharges they may have. If they have any childhood traumas that were unaddressed while they were incarcerated, we have someone on staff who sees to their mental health concerns. In fact, it's required for everyone to meet with our mental health associate so that they can look at what they may need.
Okay. Well, there's a follow-up to that. So what are you seeing as the greatest challenge to reintegration? Is it employment, housing, cultural or emotional issues, or something else? I obviously it varies according to all of it, all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah.
But I would say one of the primary hindrances to reintegration is housing. But all of the above.
Yeah.
And I think that's also the role of the social worker is that oftentimes in legal settings, attorneys and judges have they're very outcome focused, very finite, where we're very process oriented. And so it is about doing those assessments to be able to share, well, this neighborhood has a really absence of services or housing, and this is where a participant comes from. So this might be a reason. You're using that ecological framework because all of those things matter and certainly come up as challenges.
So do you foresee a day when courts are going to be interested in housing programs?
Yes, already, definitely.
Yeah.
So how does
We're
that?
already,
Yes.
Yes, it's on the top of the list of our Renew program
Okay.
is to work on housing.
So again,
Can't get into that, but yes,
all right.
it's the top of our list.
Embargoed information, but
Yes,
sort of how are
whoever
we?
interns with us next year, housing will be
Okay.
one of your projects.
All right. Excellent. Can you speak more on your assessment tools? How are you assessing recidivism, for example? I'm not exactly sure.
This is a newer.
Yeah.
This is something we're in conversation with. If these are small programs, and Lorna can speak to the nature and scope of each of the courts. And really, I think the first takeaway is this was a lot of people on a lot of different sides coming together and saying we need to do something else in the traditional modality. And so I think, like in social work, in a lot of settings, this quality of life question, or how do you assess for quality of life, looks different for different communities. You know, your truth and my truth are different. So kind of understanding those things maybe. And so we're actually in the process of talking to all the stakeholders about what this looks like. But the recidivism rate for the participants who go through this program and ostensibly get supervision time off of the back end of their post-release supervision is really high. It's not high. It's really low.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
It's really high
Yeah.
success rate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I would say we have had 51 participants graduate thus far, and it's 2 that we have had return.
So, again, you were saying something about outcomes before and sort of being too focused and sort of thinking about process, but certainly you're getting the results as well. So that's an important piece here. Question for Ms. Crawford. You mentioned you originally thought you were going to law school.
My parents wanted me to, I'll tell you that.
I've been contemplating an MSW versus JD and MSW combined degree. What is your opinion on the combined degree program? And just dual degree programs in general, since you both have that experience.
I think dual degree programs are amazing. I think the marriage of social work and the law, I think they're uniquely situated to work together, again, from that outcome-oriented and process focus. And personally, I am a social worker who's actually never practiced as a professional social worker, not in a legal setting. Both of my backgrounds, until I guess I got here. And I think that my approach to looking through that ecological framework, understanding how to assess people in their environment, but again, as Lorna mentions, like how systems and stakeholders also, if you're a macro practitioner, you also need to know how to assess and shift and bring people together. I think if you have the time, money, interest, go for the dual degree. I don't think you have to. I think that a social work program offers the micro to macro curriculum and field opportunities, but you do have to really think about what kind of work you want to do and what makes the most sense for you.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Woodham, do you feel, that you have to make a choice? I mean, between the sort of MDiv and MSS, is there some sort of cognitive?
I use them both.
Yeah.
I do not.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I have not made a choice. I combined them both intentionally, and I find it rewarding. They balance out each other.
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't regret having a dual degree.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
see it
grateful
being
for it.
such a light so much of the work that we talk about is that self-awareness piece, which everybody comes to that at different places in their life, either personally or academically or whatever pushes them. And, I think if folks are thinking about this degree or dual degree, read the preamble to our Code of Ethics. I think that is like what we kind of go back to as an ethos, as a value base, whether you call it spirituality, whether you call it your ethical center. And I think that when you're in these challenging, sometimes adversarial, sometimes different positionalities of power and privilege, all of that stuff gets activated. And so if there's anything I share with anybody, students, past, present, future, whatever, it's really having a self-awareness.
Right.
And her, I think, spiritual center has helped me and helped her negotiate through some of these things.
And spirituality is just one path to,
Exactly.
where you are in terms of values and what's most important. What do we care about? And either as individuals or as a profession. So, and I think any professional body thinks in terms of not just knowledge and skills, but also values. And we certainly have social work values that we'd like to espouse. We have so many more questions, so I'll try to get through and not talk.
Okay.
Why do you think the courts in New Jersey let social workers in the door? Was there a pre-existing recognition of the role social workers could play? And if so, what were their expectations and of the contributions you could make? You also said progress is slow. Why is that? Where within the system do you experience the greatest resistance?
We have a whole class on this, so I don't know. But I would share, and it's a very small thing. I had a conversation with a former attorney that worked at this district court, who's actually no longer there.
Okay.
And we had synergy on this interdisciplinary
Yeah.
approach to social work and the law.
Yeah.
It's like in my blood. It's the only thing I know, so
Yeah.
I love to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it was then, meeting Lorna and having this complete synergy to be able to effectuate the idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an idea person. She's the implementer. like she gets, it's very clear that your leadership and your ability to triage through this very challenging court system is really what makes it so important.
Okay. We're quickly running out of time. Do I have time for another question here? Or yeah. Okay, so let me see. Hello, I am a prospective student.
No, the first one I said.
How are individuals referred to this program? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, participants, I'm assuming.
We get a list of people who are leaving, and we have a set of, I don't want to say criteria so much, as we look at the criteria, for lack of a better word, of people who are being released on supervised
release.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, supervised release. And we meet with some of them, and we offer them the opportunity, and they volunteer for the program. It's not mandatory.
Right. Okay.
And the kind of incentive is that they get time off of their supervision.
Right, they get a year off.
Okay. So
Surveillance is a big part of the system, so any way that we can reduce that is also...
it works both ways. Okay, so to go back to this question from a prospective student, thank you so much for creating a space for this conversation. I was wondering how you find the fine line between pushing previously incarcerated men and women to find mental health care without pushing them to work with systems in our society that have possibly let them down in the past. Yeah.
It's a great question. And I love that question, and I think there should be a whole class on how we have stayed to put people in categories in all sorts of ways. Certainly mental health is one of the biggest ways. I'm not a clinician probably because of that question, quite frankly. And I think that what Lorna's also done in her experience is bringing in a healing conversation and really not do so much of the diagnostic language and this is the world you go to, because those are worlds where people have had really dehumanizing experiences. Certainly mental health is real. This is something that we want to talk about and don't want to shy away from.
Right.
And I feel like just even the staff you have and how you bring people in to talk about the conversation or partner with different stakeholders that participants might connect more with.
Right. We meet with them, and we do not force mental health counseling. They have an assessment primarily so that we know if there is anything that we should recommend and whether or not they continue with mental health counseling is voluntary.
Yeah, we're always trying to navigate that fine line between providing support but not sort of introducing a different or another level of stigmatization and so on through our services. So,
but what I can tell you though is at graduation we had several of the graduating participants just talk about how valuable it was that they had mental health counseling and how thankful they were to the mental health provider for helping them navigate some very troubling childhood issues that they had. And they were then able to encourage other participants to seek further counseling if they needed it.
You could really feel that, this idea, like you're saying, stigmatizing of folks feeling like this is supportive if done in a supportive, appropriate way instead of being mandated or forced. So I think that voluntary piece has also served us.
without feeding into those larger conversations and existing stereotypes, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
This live event makes me so excited to attend CSSW. I have a couple of questions. How do you address the financial barriers for returning citizens? Do you utilize day fines, community service? And is there a juvenile sector of the program? So if we've got time...
I'm just going to answer the juvenile piece because it's jurisdictionally looks different. So New York State finally raised the age of culpability to 18. Used to be charged as an adult at 16. So we're in a whole, New York State is in a whole operational stage in that place and where young people under 18 are being funneled to family court in a different system, not the criminal court.
Okay.
But maybe you could talk about the fines or the financial barriers for returning citizens? I mean, you've connected them with lawyers helping on credit cleanup and financial literacy.
Right, and that's, I'm just a little confused. Do you utilize day fines? I'm not sure.
I don't know what that means either.
I'm not really quite sure what day fines are. So I can't
Do you know what
speak
that
to
is?
that.
No.
In terms of the financial barriers, we do help them with setting up budgets, and that's why we encourage them to get jobs, and we assist with building resumes and job applications.
There's a great organization called finesandfees.org, I think, that looks exactly at this issue, because this is a key issue around keeping people trapped in the system, having unduly harsh fines that are just part of the system. And actually, this is even doing this collaboration was us using that in a conversation to talk about how can we support in a system that really fines people indiscriminately in this area. So.
Yeah, well, the financial aspect, and certainly I think bail reform is on a lot of people's minds, and I know we probably can't talk about it today, but
maybe somebody will come up next.
but maybe, in a future program,
it's a very important
we'll have that.
conversation.
Yeah. Last question: how can forensic social workers support children with incarcerated parents?
Well, we love this. There's a lot of opportunity. This is something that social workers do in all legal settings. You know, if you're not in any setting, I just want to put out there, if you're not talking about the criminal legal system and other legal systems, schools, healthcare, it's an epidemic. It's happening everywhere. You're just not asking the right questions. It is there and making people talk about it.
Right.
So our Osborne Association is a wonderful organization that looks at incarceration through the family systems model. There are many different, perfect one. I mean, there's a lot of different organizations. Children's of Promise do psychodynamic clinical work with children with incarcerated parents. There's televisiting programs for folks that are incarcerated very far away from their families. This is a really important issue. But I would go to Osborne Association. They have a whole initiative called New York Initiative for Children with Incarcerated Parents.
Perfect.
An amazing program, great staff. Definitely a shout out to them.
Okay. Any last words?
Last words. I would say I'm going to end with Mother to Son by Langston Hughes.
Thank you.
Don't you turn back, for all of you social workers out there who find it kind of hard, because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I'm still going, I'm still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
All right. Well, thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Jenny, for coming on our program today, and thank you for the work that you do. That concludes today's episode of Social Impact Live. We'll be back next week with Professor Louisa Gilbert to discuss her work developing interventions for gender-based violence. So looking forward to seeing you then. Goodbye.